Hi, in this video I'll be installing a dash cam into the Subaru Forester. This is a 2023 model. Right, since this vehicle is a right-hand side drive, I'm going to install the dash cam over here. So for example, that's what it's going to look like, and it's completely blocked by the mirror, meaning that the dash cam is totally out of the way. So I'll mount the dash cam here, then I'll thread the wire through here. I will come through here. I will then go down the side panel. I'll come down here. I'll go in here and I will find one available slot or one of the fuses which I can use. Right, I'm going to start here. So I'm just opening this cover here. Now there are 2 star screws, so I just need to open 1 and 2. Right, now I just need to pull on this and this will come out like that. Right, now I'll be able to install the dash here on the glass. The wire will come through, travel all the way along there. I'll catch the wire and I'll run it all along here. Now one of the reasons why I opened this is if you have the heated mirror on the side here, you'll find a connector which you can use to power up your dash cam, which means you don't have to go to the fuse box. You can connect to your dash cam right over here. Now, since my Subaru Forester does not have that option, so I'm going to have to feed the wire through here. I'll catch the wire here and I'll run it along there. Right, this is the dash cam I'm using. It's a Hikvision and it doesn't use a lot of power. The specification says that the maximum power consumption is 5 watts. That means it's going to get power from this USB to a maximum of 1 amp. Now, this works on 5 volts. That's why the power source cable looks like this. It's a USB cable. And the dash cam comes with this adapter, which is actually the 12 volt to 5 volt step down. So what happens is you plug this inside your cigarette lighter and then you can step down. Now, because I'm hardwiring it, I'm not going to be using this. So that means I need to still step down the car's 12 volts to 5 volts. So in this installation, I'm going to use this little step down converter. There will be the 12 volts. So if I just show you what is advertised here, input is 12 volts, and on the output this has an option of 12 volts, 5 volts and 9 volts. So I'm going to use this to step down the 12 volts from the vehicle to the 5 volts which the dash cam wants. Now, there are many different types of converters and some even have a USB port where you can actually plug in. But in my installation, I'm going to be cutting this and this is going to be connected to the fuse box. So this is the input side, which will be connected via one of these fuse links. So this will be plugged into the fuse box. And then on the output of this, it's going to go to the input, which is going to go like this. And then it's going to step it down to 5 volts. Which is then going to be hardwired to the dash cam, and I will go through all these steps shortly. Now, this could be plugged into one of your USB outlets on the vehicle, but I want to hardwire it. I don't want to have wires hanging around here or in the back for my dash cam. So that means I don't need this connector because I'm going to be soldering it to another wire. So I'm just going to cut this and then I'll have the wire free, which will be easier to route. Right, I now have the wire alone and I can feed it through from where the dash cam will be mounted. So since my dash cam will be mounted here on the glass, I can now feed this wire through this plastic cover here. Right, so I'm just feeding that wire through. Right, since there's quite a bit of space here, I'm going to leave a little bit of free play here for this dash cam wire. Sometimes you need to do some diagnostics and you want to take the dash cam off and you need to have it in your hand. You kind of need this extra length. So I've just left maybe 20 centimeters. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this all along here, round here, and down there. Now, I don't want to have any rattles, so what I do is I wrap the new wire in a double-sided tape. This is an anti-rattle tape. This is a tape that often panel beaters buy to reduce rattles in a vehicle. So it's just, all it is just a high quality, very thin double-sided tape. And I just put the wire inside it and then I will open up this side and that means that both sides will be sticky. That means that when I run this, it will be stuck. Even if it does come loose, it'll move and then be stuck again. So because I'm going to be running this kind of superficially for this first part here, I'm running the wire in this double-sided tape. Right, so I'm just removing the backing of the tape, so now it's sticky on both sides. Right, so there's my very sticky wire now. So I'm going to pull this down a little bit. The wire is going to run on the inside there. And then over here, I'm just going to drop the wire inside here, just about here. And then I'm going to use my finger just to stick it down until I get to there. Over here, I'm going to open this panel. Right, I'm going to quickly open this panel now. I'm just going to open this bead here. Right, so the bead is off. Now I just take my hand here, starting at the top. And there's a clip here. No, just do that. Right, there is this tab that is holding this panel onto the chassis. I I'm not going to open it. It's fine. There's enough space to work here. I just want to release this panel. So there, all I've done is I've just pulled it a bit to the side. You can see I've pulled it out from the bottom there. This is the airbag. Right, so very important is to run at the back here, not in front of the airbag, and never go across the airbag. So I'm going to run with this other wire. It's going to run all along there. Right, so coming back to this section, I just slid it inside there. It's now there by the windscreen. I'm just going to push it in, tuck it under. Right, so it's there. It's underneath here. There's nothing sticking out. Right, so just having a look there, it's just underneath there. It does a bit of a bend there, and now it's along this other wire here. All right, so there is the wire running down next to the airbag wire. And I guess you could cable it to that airbag wire. I'm just running it down there. You can see I've stuck it down with this high quality double-sided tape. This double-sided tape can be left in the sun for ages and it doesn't come off, and then the wire goes down there. I'm going to try open this panel quickly. Right, so I'm just putting my pry tool on the side. There's a clip that's already opened. This is a right-hand side drive vehicle. Your fuse box might be on the other side. So I just open this, and to get this off, I just pull it down. So the next step is to use my multimeter to measure which of those circuits or fuses is on when the car is on and off when the car is off. Remember, I don't want the dash cam to deplete the battery when the car is off. I want the dash cam to go off when the car is off. You might not actually want that. Some dash cams actually are aware that the car isn't moving and won't deplete your battery. And also it's nice if someone reverses into you, the dash cam has kind of always got some power to record if there's any damage or break into your car while you're not there. But in this case, I want the dash cam to go off when the vehicle is off. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use my multimeter. I've taken the negative terminal and I've put it on the chassis, which is ground. I've set my meter to volts. I'm going to use the other lead, which is the positive lead, and I'm going to touch it on a fuse and see if it goes on or 12 volts when the car is on and off when the car is off. I've already done this exercise. I'm just going to give you the summary. This one over here is very useful. It says 12 volt socket. That's the socket or circuit that is designed for end users to plug in stuff, plug in phones and things like that. So I'm specifically going to use that one. So if I look at this cover, notice that it says top. Even though the cover was like this, to work out which fuse is where, I have to flip it, and I can see that it's on the second row. I'm going to take a measurement on that fuse. Right, so there's the 15 amp fuse, and that's the fuse which is for the 12 volt outlet. So I'm going to put my meter here and I'm going to show you what the meter reads. All right, I have the key in the vehicle and I'm just going to press the engine start button. Notice that the meter is showing 0 volts. I'm just going to press this once, and as I pressed it, there you can see the 12 volts. Now I'm going to switch it off. So now the vehicle is off, and there you can see the voltage is gone back to 0. So I can use this circuit. All right, so I'm just going to use a long nose pliers to just pull out that fuse. Right, so I've pulled out the fuse. Right, now in place of that fuse, I'm now going to insert this. What this does is it allows me to connect that same 15 amp fuse, which I'm now going to insert over there. So that means that current will go there through the 15 amp and go back to that terminal. But in parallel, I've now got a 5 amp fuse, which will go in parallel, and there is the lead. Right, so this is the connection to the positive. This is the parallel fuse link. And there is the wire, which I'm now going to wire to the converter. Now, just a note about the fuse size. Place where I'm connecting this had a 15 amp fuse. Now if I put a 5 amp in parallel, it means that I now can collectively pull up to 20 amps on that same circuit, which would be incorrect. So what I should be doing here is either reduce the 15 amp to say 10 amp, and then this could be a 5 amp, or I can keep this as a 15 amp but then don't have a 5 amp here. I have like a much lower current, maybe a 2 amp, and that should be fine. So even though you use these parallel connections, one has to be aware that the original circuit, the wires for the circuit that were wired to your fuse box, were specified for a 15 amp fuse. If I just put another 15 amp fuse here, then I'm actually overloading the system, because then it means I can pull 30 amps from that same wire, which would be incorrect. So in this case, I'm going to keep the 15 amp, which is for the 12 volt socket, and I'm going to change this to a 2 amp. I currently don't have stock of a 2 amp, but when I do, I will change this just to a 2 amp, which is enough for the dash cam in any event. Right, so this is going to be the positive, which is going to be fed to the converter. So what I've done is I've just cut off the terminal and I'm ready to solder this directly to the converter. Now here is my converter, and this is the input side. So I need to just cut this wire because I'm not going to be using this jack. I'm going to hardwire it and solder it. Now I just need to work out which of these wires was positive and which was negative. Now there is a white stripe on the wire here on the left that I'm assuming would be positive, but I'm just going to check that. So what I can do now is just use my multimeter and just check that the wire with the white line is connected to inside there, the tip. Right, so there's my meter set to continuity. I'm showing it's a dead short, and there I'm just confirming that the inside is positive and that the striped wire with the white dash is positive. You should be able to hear my meter beeping. That's telling me it's a short circuit, which means it's correct. Now before I solder the positive wire onto the converter, I'm just putting some heat shrink. So I've got my heat shrink there, which I'll use to cover the wire once it's soldered. When soldering, just make sure you have a rubber mat underneath. You don't want any solder to drop onto the carpet and damage the car. Right, it's been soldered now. I can just cover it with my heat shrink, and then just using a flame I can shrink the heat shrink. Right, so that is now safe. So there we go, that's going to be connected directly into the fuse box. There goes the positive. Now I just need to make a plan for the negative. Right, so I'm in luck. There's a screw and there's the chassis, so I can connect a lug like this and just connect the negative to the back. I can solder the negative in there, or I can crimp it. So I just need to open that and prepare it for this lug. Right, so I just open that. Right, I just feed the negative into this lug. Now, because the screw is quite far in, the lug is going to add a profile. So I'm just going to squash the lug using pliers so that it's flat. Right, I flattened that lug. Now I'm just going to put some solder in the back there and solder the wire in. Right, I've soldered that. Right, so there's the 0 volts, and I can just screw the screw in here. Right, so we now have the negative, and there is the positive waiting to be connected to the fuse box. Alright, there is the 5 volt from my converter. I've already put the heat shrink on. You don't have to use heat shrink, you can use insulation tape. There's the positive, the negative. I know this is the positive because it's got the white stripe on it. This one is blank, and then I just need to wire it to my dash cam positive and negative. So there's my dash cam positive and negative, so I'm just going to wire them now. Right, since this converter came with these other fly leads for a 9 and 12 volt, I don't need them, so I'm going to actually cut them off and blank them. Right, so there I've cut them off, and notice that I cut them off not in the same line. So even if they did somehow touch each other, they would never short. Now I'll just tape them up or put some heat shrink. Alright, so I've just blanked off those. There is the connection. Alright, so there is the 12 volts coming from the fuse box. There is the 0 volts. That is stepped down from 12 volts to 5 volts. There's the output going to my dash cam. Right, so now I need to just place this in a manner that it is snug. Now there's quite a lot of space here. There is quite a profile there, so I can actually just stick the converter on here. Now, if your vehicle doesn't have space, you can just tuck this in the back there or on the inside of the fuse box. There's quite a lot of space on the inside. I'm just putting it on the outside for now. And as a matter of precaution, I like to just go over the heat shrink with some tape, especially the positive wire. Right, this pigtail I can either feed inside there or just stick it on the side here like that. Right, just make sure the wire is tucked at the back there and it is not visible, and now I can just put the cover on. Right, it's a good idea to just test the system before you close everything up. And there it's completely fit snugly in there. Right, so over here I have the 15 amp fuse, and then there is the fuse for my dash cam. Now I quickly want to show you the wiring layout. What's happening is the input from your battery or your alternator is going to be there. This is the car's 12 volts. Then on the other side, this is the load. So that is going to feed, in this case, the 12 volt socket in the vehicle, because this fuse, this position where I have plugged it in is the 12 volt socket. So that is the output. If the 12 volt socket is pulling more than 15 amps, this fuse will blow, but the one on the top will still be intact. So just be aware that you are in a way overloading the circuit, and as I said earlier, maybe consider using a much smaller fuse here or scaling down from a 15 amp to a 10 amp. But as I said, it's just a dash cam, so I'm going to leave the 15 amp and then replace this with a 2 amp, and it should be fine. Now, which way do you plug this in the fuse box? Because it could be plugged in like that, or it could be plugged in like that, and that is extremely important, because if it's plugged in the wrong orientation, I won't be going through the fuse. I'll be going directly from the car's power supply, and that would be incorrect. I have to measure inside the vehicle which is the 12 volts and which is the load side. I'm going to take the negative side of my meter and just put it on the chassis somewhere. All right, so I've just put the negative over there. My meter is now set to volts. Now what I want to do is I want to know which side is the 12 volts and which side is the load side. Can only do this when the fuse is removed. So what I've got to do is I've got to take my meter, the lead, and put my lead on one side where it would connect with the fuse and see what my meter says. And then I've got to do the same on the other side. And when I get the 12 volts, then I know which is the side for the supply and which is the side for the load. But now, since this circuit only goes on when the car is on, I've got to make sure that the car is on to do this. Otherwise, it's not going to work. Right, so I've confirmed that it's on the right-hand side. My meter is now showing 12 volts. And if I check the other side, nothing. So the left side is the load and the right-hand side is the 12 volt supply. All right, so what does that mean? If you look here on this side, there's the fly lead going to my dash cam. So the input must be this side and the 12 volt to the load must be this side. So I must make sure that when I plug this thing in, this is the 12 volt side and that on the right hand side is the load. The left hand side, where you can see the connector coming out, that is the load side. The right hand side is the 12 volt side. So it has to go through the fuse to get to the load side. Right, so I just need to return this panel. Start at the bottom. There are two flanges that need to be seated. Right, it's seated at the bottom. Now I just line the snap plugs. That's one. And that's two. Now I just return the bead. Right, so the leftover wire, I've just wrapped it with the tape and fastened it down. There's two clips there, so that slides in like that, and then I just push it with my hand. Right, replace the two screws. Right, I just return this cover, I push the front in first, and then I press it at the back there. Now, the dash cam is going to be on the left-hand side because this is a right-hand side drive and I want the dash cam out of the way. So what I just need to do is check that if the mirror is moved a little bit, it doesn't bump the dash cam. Just now we have a different driver and they might want the mirror in a different position. So I can see that the dash cam is now in place and that is going to be suitable. And then just make sure you're not blocking anything. Now in this case, the camera system, the eyesight system is enclosed, so I'm not worried. I'm not blocking anything. Now, I recommend cleaning the surface with rubbing alcohol. So I use this rubbing alcohol. It's 90% alcohol. There's no glycol. Right, I'm using the rubbing alcohol and I'm just cleaning the surface. Now, this particular dash cam has this film, which it says I must first apply this to the glass, then the dash cam sticks on here. Now, this is a little bit big, so I'm going to cut it a bit smaller, and then I'm going to install this on the glass. Right, I've cut it a little bit smaller because I don't want any part going on the eyesight system. Now you just have to lift this side and then stick it on the glass. So the method is as follows. You lift the film off, starting from the middle, you go like this outwards so that you get rid of any bubbles on the glass. So that's the way I'll be doing it. And just before working with it, just remove any oil off the fingertips. So I just take that same rubbing alcohol and I clean my fingertips. Right, then I just clean this film with rubbing alcohol. I just pull the protective cover off the dash cam double-sided tape. Right, there's the film. Not every dash cam comes with that. This particular one does. So I put the film, then the dash cam stuck on there. There's the wire. Right, so there's the power LEDs for the dash cam. All right, so that's the live view of the dash cam on my phone. And thanks for watching and cheers.